Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the post-game podcast for the Timberwolves preseason finale. An impressive performance, an impressive win over the Chicago Bulls. We'll break down Ant's dominant first half performance, some Ant Rudy vibes, and also another strong bench performance. It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. And the preseason is officially over. Plenty to get to on the postgame pod from the preseason finale on Thursday night. A big thank you, first of all, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. You can find me at @BBeecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN, or the show account at Locked On T-Wolves. Don't forget the T. All right, preseason's over. The Timberwolves, for the first time in franchise history, have gone undefeated in the preseason slate, 5-0. And does that matter? No, other than maybe I think the vibes overall around the team they're really, really good right now. And I don't know how much of that has to do with, like, on the one hand, if you go 2-3 in the preseason, it's whatever, it's preseason. Nobody's really cares. Guys are still laughing on the bench. Like, everybody's happy. But right now, I don't know. It just kind of feels like everybody's that much more optimistic because it's gone so well. Now, of course, all the other stuff has gone well too. The stuff that actually matters in preseason, like what we'll get to today, Ant's performance, Anton Rudy's, playing together, how they looked in terms of their chemistry on the court, the overall defensive performance, the bench unit looking good. Like, all those other things still matter. But there's something about that 5-0, even if it is preseason, it doesn't matter. But it kind of feels like it does, just from a confidence standpoint. And again, really the vibes around the team. I'm using the word vibes a lot here because we're going to talk about Ant and Rudy vibes today too. But that's kind of where we're at right now. This is the time of year where you can feel good about that going into the season. The optimism can reign supreme. And next week, we're going to get into all the ranking, or I should say preseason previews. Also, I'll give my Western Conference rankings or my projected standings, I guess, for the season. That'll all be a next week thing. Today, we're just focusing on Wolves Bulls from Thursday. And if I had to pick one headline for this game, it would just come from the first half. And it's Anthony Edwards was awesome. This was the quintessential Anthony Edwards game. And if we could copy and paste this performance to 82 games this year, we would. Just real quick from a game flow perspective, the Wolves got up by 8 at the end of the first quarter. It was only a 1-point game at halftime. And the Wolves played rotation, guys. There were some moments in the second quarter where the defense was pretty sloppy for the Wolves, and it wasn't perfect, certainly. They were up 1 at halftime. But the Bulls mostly played regular rotation guys the entire game, save for the very end of the fourth quarter. In fact, the Wolves' third unit, their deep bench guys, were playing against a regular rotation unit for the Bulls in the fourth quarter and more than held their own. Minnesota kind of pulled away in the third quarter with their second unit. None of the starters played after halftime. I should note, Karl-Anthony Towns didn't play. Knee soreness. Mike Conley didn't play due to an illness, and of course, Jade McDaniels is still out with the calf. So Ant and Rudy both started, along with Shake Milton, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Kyle Anderson, who are all going to be members of that first reserve unit for the Wolves. The third quarter then was an all-bench unit, so no Rudy, no Ant in the third quarter and beyond. The starting unit for the Wolves was very good. It mostly had to do with Anthony Edwards. And there's really no other way to say this other than Anthony Edwards was awesome in this game. He had 19 points, again, all in the first half. He played 20 minutes of the first 24. So he played the whole first quarter, sat for the first 4 minutes of the second, and closed out the rest of the half because obviously Finch knew he wasn't going to play in the second half. 19 points on 8 of 13 shooting, 2 of 4 on 3-point attempts. And he only had 1 free throw attempt on an and one that he knocked down. He had 5 rebounds in one half of play, 1 assist. He did have 4 turnovers, I guess, which would be the one blight on his record. But they were aggressive turnovers that I want to say it was because it was preseason. Hopefully we don't see Ant passing quite this aggressively in the regular season. He had a couple cross court, like tried to hook, assists into the corner that went into the crowd. Like, as long as we don't see those on a regular basis, if you remove those turnovers from the equation, which, you can't really, but again, preseason, his shot selection was absolutely perfect. That's what I want to copy and paste specifically to every game the rest of this year. 13 shot attempts, 4 of them were 3. So about 1 in every 3 shot attempts. Maybe you'd like to see that tick up slightly. Maybe it should be 1 in every, 2.5 shot attempts should be a 3 instead of 1 in every 3. But that's okay, right? 4 3-point attempts out of 13 shot attempts. Only 2 non-paint 2s were shot by Anthony Edwards in this game. He had 2 mid-range jumpers that he attempted. Actually, I think he made both of them, or maybe he missed one. I'm pretty sure he made both of them. So he was 2 of 4 on 3s. He was 6 of 9 on 2-point attempts. Got to the basket a ton. So that means he had 7 paint 2s that he attempted and 4 3-pointers he attempted. We can live with that every day of the week, right? I talked on Thursday's show. I did the Anthony Edwards season preview, and I talked a little bit about how Ant basically averaged 2 non-paint 2s a game this year. And it'd be great if that turned into, or last year, I should say, it'd be great if that was only 1 non-paint 2 per game. Well, he attempted 2.5, but again, because he was getting so many shots off in the paint and outside the arc, it's fine. Like, that blend is okay. If he shoots the ball 13 times, he shoots 4 3s, 7 paint 2-point attempts, and 2 non-paint 2s. Again, if one of those non-paint 2s was a 3 and we were saying it was 5 3-pointers, that would be ideal. This is the next closest thing. This was fine. It was a really, really good blend. I thought he was attacking well. He had obviously a highlight dunk that no doubt you've seen by now, where he jumped from the hash mark, the dotted line, essentially. So what is that, like 10 feet? And jumped from there. And it was off of an attack. I think it was Shake Milton that attacked from the left corner, and Ant was in the right slot and just kind of started to fade to his left. He was being guarded by Alex Caruso, all defensive first team this year. And Caruso was collapsing in the paint correctly because he was worried about the attack. Maybe collapsing a little too far, because are you really worried about Shake Milton on the baseline, or are you worried about leaving Ant catching and shooting at 3s, 43% or 42% catch and shoot 3s, or attacking off the catch? Sure enough, Caruso got lost in the shuffle. Ant faded to his left, got a perfect pass from Shake, drove hard to his left, and got really an uncontested dunk from, left the floor, left his feet 10 feet away from the rim, and had a highlight dunk. And then the next possession down, he knocks down a 3-pointer, catch and shoot 3. Just a professional, dominant, exactly what you want to see first quarter, or first half, I should say, from Anthony Edwards. The second Ant piece that I want to talk about is the Anton Rudy chemistry. Clearly, these guys have worked on that. Exit interviews last year, Ant talked about how they wanted to spend time working on it this offseason. He knew that they never really clicked, because remember, we talk a bunch about Cat only played 29 games last year, and rightfully so. But Ant and Rudy played essentially every game together, save a few here and there, but effectively the whole season. Neither one of them missed significant time. And they never really clicked. And that's putting it lightly. The pick and roll game between Ant and Rudy. And then Mike Conley showed up, and it was like, oh, okay, these guys know how to play together. Conley and Rudy do, right? Because they did it for several years in Utah. One of the things that the Wolves need to unlock this year, and will take them from what I think will be a mid-40s to upper 40s win team as a floor, barring catastrophic injury, this is a mid-40s win team for sure. The ceiling of this team is astronomical. It really, truly is top 2 or 3 in the West is the ceiling of this team. Will they reach it? I don't know. But the talent level on this team is so, so, so impressive. But if 2 of their best 4 players can't figure out pick and roll game, when one's a guard and one's a big, and one has, dragged the offense down, frankly, when he was on the floor last year in Rudy Gobert, that's a serious problem. But if they click, then the sky really is the limit for this team. And I don't think I can say that enough. Otherwise, when Conley's got the ball in his hands, and Rudy said it is, that's going to be a Rudy Conley screen and roll. Defenses know it's coming. If Ant's got the ball in his hands, he's probably going to attack in isolation, or he's going to shoot a pull-up, right? But if you can make the Ant Rudy pick and roll be effective and dynamic, we saw an alley-oop from Ant to Rudy that was like Ant moving to his right, and it actually wasn't a straight pick and roll. I think Rudy set an off-ball screen and cut to the rim. It was clearly designed, right? This play was called, but it wasn't a straight pick and roll. And this might be part of the solution, is doing something so that defenses aren't necessarily expecting it, to at least, shake loose a few buckets from this pairing. But Rudy set I believe it was an off-ball screen. I should have watched it again. And then cut almost like he was rolling to the basket, rolled to the basket, and Ant like hooked a pass over his head from just to the right of the top of the key outside the arc. And it was a really good pass and a really great catch by Rudy. Was able to elevate, grab it, throw it through, and I believe was fouled on the play as well. It was equal parts a great pass and a great catch and finish by Rudy. It didn't feel like a very high percentage play, which is the one thing that worried me. But they both have the ability to finish a play like that on a regular basis. So if we just see that a bit more, a couple times a game, and do that with Conley and Rudy a couple times a game, then Rudy becomes an effective offensive weapon, and it improves Ant's offensive game by that much, because defenses have to respect the idea that he might throw that lob to Rudy, and you can't load up on Ant with the ball in his hands quite as much. All right, I want to talk about some other Rudy stuff. He played with Naz, which I thought was interesting. Obviously, we're going to see that a lot, but he played with Naz against the small Bulls lineup, I guess, is the more important piece of that. And then also the all-bench second half, what that looked like. So we're going to get to all that here next. We'll also finish with individual studs and duds here at the end of the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's right. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. It's one of my favorite sports months of the year. It's October versus March in my mind. You've got the smack dab in the middle of football season, both college, literally the middle of college football season. We're nearing the midway point of the NFL. Get the start of NBA regular season next week. College basketball is around the corner. The start of the NHL season, baseball playoffs. All that is fun to bet on FanDuel, and also win totals. I'm going to talk win totals next week. I'll give my Wolves official projection. The teaser is, and I've said this before, the Wolves will be over the 44.5 win total at FanDuel. That's an easy over in my mind. It's an easy over. And we'll talk Western Conference rankings next week as well. But go check that out. Win totals are over there at FanDuel, as well as spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. The app is so easy to use. There's that whole wide range of betting options that I just listed. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. The Locked On Ultimate NBA Season Preview is here, a 6-episode series with all 30 of our Locked On NBA team shows, from contenders to tankers. The Locked On NBA crew goes in depth into the biggest storylines heading into the season. Catch all 6 episodes on Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. There's also a I forget what we called the group that the Wolves are in, the Risers or something like that. But anyway, the last episode in the feed, if you're listening on audio, is that show that I was involved in. So go check that out here at the Locked On Wolves feed. But you can check all of it out over at Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. All right. So we talked a little bit about the Ant Rudy dynamic in this game and how awesome Ant was. The Ant Rudy dynamic at least improving. In the second quarter, Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid were on the floor against a tiny Bulls lineup, which, Torrey Craig was guarding Rudy Gobert. And this was the exact sort of situation that the Wolves failed to take advantage of with frequency last year. And it's something that plagued the Gobert Jazz teams in the playoffs, where teams would just front Rudy with a smaller player, or not even necessarily front him, but guard him in the post and then collapse and bring a double. And this was a mixed bag for me. Eventually, the Wolves did force the Bulls to put Vucevic back on the floor. But there was one instance where they collapsed on Rudy and he turned the ball over. They just stole it from him. And he could have gotten called for an offensive foul, kind of elbowed Torrey Craig in the face. But then there was a couple other instances where Rudy passed out of it, and because the Bulls were double teaming, they had an open shot attempt. Rudy's a pretty decent passer. Now the Wolves don't give, and he's a good passer on like short rolls, right? When he's screening on the perimeter, can catch and short roll and kick to the opposite corner. They did that all the time in Utah. where he obviously doesn't post up that much. Now, if you look at the post up numbers, Rudy actually is a successful post up player. Part of that is because he doesn't do it that often. So when he does, it's usually because there's a mismatch, and he's got a drop step. He doesn't really have much of a hook, but he could dunk over guys. If he gets a seal and is low enough, that's a post up technically, right? And he could be successful in a straight post up. And when a double team comes, that's where Rudy struggles a little bit. And that didn't look great in this game. They got a couple of open threes because of Rudy's presence. And I know that and Kevin Lynch was, Kevin Lynch was on the Bally Sports North broadcast, of course. Side note, get well soon, Jim Pete. Hopefully it sounds like he'll be back next week, hopefully. But Kevin Lynch did a good job as the analyst overall. And he is one of the analysts who you'll hear talk about, hey, they need to pound the ball in the paint. You need to get in the post, et cetera. And of course, the logic would tell you have to do that against a small lineup when you've got two centers on the floor and Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid. The other team barely has a power forward on the floor. But you can also use your size advantage to get wide open threes because the opposing team is thinking, okay, we need to collapse if Rudy gets the ball in deep, if Naz gets the ball in deep, we need to bring a double. So if they don't, absolutely you should punish them down low. But this is the rare time when I would actually argue playing inside out makes sense, right? That's the old adage is you have to play inside out. That's a get off my lawn mid-90s mentality, right? This is 2000, almost 24. That's not necessarily how it's not even not necessarily. It's not how you play NBA basketball in 2023-24. It's just not. But if you have that big of a size advantage, playing inside out makes a little more sense because if they don't bring guys down to double, absolutely Rudy should be able to go to work against Torrey Craig one-on-one. But if they bring a double, quickly get that ball out to the perimeter, make that quick decision. You're going to get open threes because the other team will perhaps too aggressively collapse on Gobert, on Naz, et cetera. Naz hit an open three with this lineup on the floor because the defense was collapsing, and they will just overplay. So I don't necessarily think against small lineups that Wolves lineup will necessarily, I don't think Rudy's necessarily going to score a bunch because that's not his game. I think those lineups will actually lead to more three-point attempts for the Wolves. And so that, if you obviously Naz can shoot threes, Rudy is usually the only one on the floor that can't shoot threes in almost any Wolves lineup. So say it is Rudy and Naz and Ant and, obviously Conley didn't play in this game, but Conley or whoever, they're spreading the floor and you're going to get open 3-point attempts. And that to me is what that lineup should generate for the Wolves. It's not going to generate a ton of post opportunities simply because you have a size mismatch. I think that in turn generates more long range open 3-point attempts. We saw that in this game. Overall, it was a mixed bag because Rudy still looks a little skittish with the ball in his hands when he gets doubled because he's not used to posting up that frequently. I know he does it for Team France. I know he does it with decent success for the Wolves, but in very small opportunities. You can't overexpose Rudy in the post. That doesn't make sense. That's not his game. But overall, it went well. Talking about the second half, talking about the Wolves bench. This was an all-bench second half. The second unit started the third quarter. As the third quarter wore on, Finch started to filter in some of the third unit guys, and then by the end of the game, you had non-roster guys playing for the Wolves. The all-bench second half went extremely well. The Wolves were a plus 11 in the third quarter. They were -3 in the fourth. But the first part of the fourth quarter, that was third-string Wolves players against first and second team Bulls guys. Like DeMar DeRozan was on the floor, Nikola Vucevic was on the floor, Alex Caruso was on the floor, Ayo Dosunmu played minutes in the fourth quarter as well. And the Wolves more than held their own. Third quarter was a lot of Troy Brown Jr. He was fantastic. We'll talk more about him in a minute. Luka Garza was very good again, 11 points on 6 shots for him. Jordan McLaughlin was fantastic in this game. We should talk about him now because, let's just talk about him now. J-Mac got some second quarter minutes. Remember, no Conley and no McDaniels and no Towns. So we saw a little bit more McLaughlin early than I think we'll necessarily see on a regular basis in the regular season. But he was really good. He followed up a strong performance last time out on Tuesday night against Maccabi Renana with another strong performance. In only 13 minutes, J-Mac had 11 points, 4 of 5 shooting, knocked down 3 of 4 3-pointers, 4 assists, did have a couple of turnovers. One was the Bulls decided a full court press on an out of bounds play after the ball went out on the Bulls, dead ball. The Bulls pressed and McLaughlin, nobody helped him out. He got trapped and that was one of his 2 turnovers. I don't remember what the other one was, but he was a +6 in those 13 minutes. Really strong performance from J-Mac. Third quarter was really good. Troy Brown was great in the third. Garza, I mentioned. Naz played some third quarter minutes as well because Rudy didn't play. Naz was really good. We'll talk more about him in the last segment of the show. But it was an all bench third quarter, was very impressive. The Wolves' second unit against mostly the Bulls' first unit, and they played well. The deep bench guys, I'll talk a little bit about them now because we'll get into studs and duds here next. Deep bench, Daisha Nix, very much an up and down performance for him. He was really good on Tuesday, and I said on Tuesday's show, I thought the background in this is I wasn't psyched about signing him. I'm not a huge Daisha Nix fan, but the Wolves obviously like huge guards. They want big guards as an option. So after Tuesday's performance, they gave him a ton of run. And also, he was kind of the first deep bench guy, if you will, off the bench in the fourth quarter in this game. I think the Wolves are considering giving him a two-way deal. That's kind of what this feels like. He probably needed to have a better performance than this to really kind of cement that role. He had 3 turnovers in 9 minutes, a couple of them pretty sloppy. Did get to the line once. He knocked down a deep 3 off the dribble. He had 5 points, 1 assist, 3 turnovers in 9 minutes, was a -3. An uneven performance, but had good moments again for Daisha Nix. Tyrese Martin, I thought, played well. I think he's making a decent case. Trevor Keels did not pop very much in this game. I still really like him overall as a player based on what he did in the G League and for the Knicks last year. And, his profile as a prospect a couple of years ago coming out of the draft. I like Trevor Keels a lot. He was the least impressive of those guys. By the way, Vit Krejci got waived the other day, so DJ Carton was signed to, I would imagine, an Exhibit 10 deal. Carton played for the Iowa Wolves last year, was on the Summer League team. Relatively underwhelming, in my opinion. Didn't do much in this game, but he saw 3 minutes at the end of the game. So anyway, deep bench guys played fine. Knicks, I'm sure, would have loved to do a little bit more with his minutes. Let's close the show today by talking studs and duds. Who from the Wolves rotation had a really impressive game? I have 1 starter and 2 regular bench rotation guys on my studs list. We'll do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Jase Medical. Jase Medical is home of the Jase Case. The Jase Case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. And in a world as uncertain as ours, you need to get a Jase Case. It's really the right way to go. I got mine a couple of weeks ago, and headed into the fall and winter travel season, I'm excited to have it and know that my family's taken care of in any number of situations. I mean, there's so much going on in the world. Obviously, we're only a couple years removed from the end of the pandemic. I think not even a couple years removed from the end of it. But obviously right now, the terrible unrest in the Middle East, recently the fires in Hawaii, we had hurricane season, earthquakes throughout the world, also reliance on supply chain from China, all these other factors that could contribute to your everyday life in a negative way that you can't control at all. And the Jase Case and Jase Medical are one way to get that peace of mind. Jase Case and Jase Medical offers customization for your Jase Case with dozens of add-on medications as well. You can choose the medications that best fit you and your family's unique needs. Jase Medical is continually working to expand their medication offerings as well. In these recent efforts, they've added several different prescriptions to the Jase Case. Also, you could buy a gift card for your family or your loved ones so that they can get a Jase Case of their own. Go to jasemedical.com and enter the code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. Again, really get peace of mind for your family from the Jase Case from Jase Medical. jasemedical.com, promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount. That's promo code LOCKEDON at Jase Medical, JASE medical.com. All right, let's close the show with individual studs and duds from Wolves Bulls on Thursday night. Obviously, we have to open the studs with Anthony Edwards. We talked about him earlier. Quickly, I'll give his line again. Fantastic all-around performance, especially shot selection-wise. Ant had 19 points all in those 20 first-half minutes. Did not play in the second half. 8 of 13 shooting. 2 of 4 outside the arc. 1 of 1 at the free throw line. 5 boards, which is also good to see. I didn't talk about that earlier. But 5 boards in 20 minutes is nice. I mean, that's a nice pace for Ant. If he's going to average, remember last year, he brought his rebound average from about 4 a game up to 5 a game. The rebound rate went up by like 3.5 points. If that inches upwards again, that's going to bring that's going to add a ton. If he can grab another extra half rebound a game, that seriously will matter over the course of a season, both for his individual metrics and what he's able to provide to the team, and also the team as a whole, which has really struggled to defensive rebound for years now. He had 1 assist. He did have the 4 turnovers, but again, the shot selection was so impressive. The chemistry that he showed, at least the effort towards having chemistry with Rudy Gobert, was super important in this game too. So again, 19-5 for Ant, 8 of 13 shooting, very good performance overall. Naz Reid is also a stud in this game. 14 points, 8 boards in 21 minutes. He played the most minutes of anyone off the bench besides Troy Brown Jr. His 14 points came on just 6 shots, 4 of 6 overall from the field, 1 of 3 on threes, 5 of 7 at the line. He had a couple of nice inside moves that got him to the basket, or got him to the line, I should say. A couple of nice catches too. He slipped the screen at one point, got a nice pass. I think it was Troy Brown that got him the pass. It was like a one-handed catch and finish for an and one for Naz. Had a couple of nice post moves too. He was second on the team in plus minus for whatever that's worth in a preseason game. Plus 10 for Naz. Again, 14 and 8, 3 assists, 2 steals, only 1 turnover, a well-rounded Naz Reid performance. And he's had a really nice preseason. I've been really impressed with him. His activity level on the glass is something that's going to be very important. We've talked about this before, but that's one of the areas he improved in the most last year. So to see that stay, to see him continually improve on the glass will be huge for the Wolves. And this was really good. He did a really good job in this game of being on the glass and just making the right decisions with the ball in his hands. The 3 assists are nice to see as well in 21 minutes. My third stud in this game after Ant and Naz is Troy Brown Jr. Really strong game for Troy Brown. 12 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 turnover, was a team high plus 11. All 12 of his points came on 5 3-point attempts. He had well, that's a weird way to say that. All 5 of his shot attempts were from outside the arc. He was 4 of 5 on threes, got hot at one point. I think it was third quarter when he hit 2 or 3 in a row. But a really strong all-around performance. I like it wasn't just the 3-point shooting. Obviously, that's what pops out the most. But I thought he was good defensively. I thought he was really active. His aggressiveness, by the way, both him and Shake Milton, actually, in terms of newcomers, being so aggressive defensively and getting back and hustling and like those things, again, it seems silly that I talk so much about it, but what did this team struggle with last year? Transition defense, defensive rebounding. Those are probably and also fouling. All 3 of those things are linked to effort. They really are, right? Defensive rebounding, yeah, it's about positioning. It's about scheme. Like what are you trying to do defensively? Are you trying to get back offensively in transition, et cetera? But it comes down to effort level. Same thing with transition defense. Yes, there's technique, there's matching up, there's stopping the ball, but how much of that is tied to effort? And even fouling sometimes. If you're lazy, you're not in position, you're not moving your feet, you're defending with your hands and your arms and not your feet, that's going to lead to foul trouble. To see the effort level of somebody, a newcomer like Troy Brown Jr., getting back defensively, there was one really bad, I can't remember the exact play, but there was a bad turnover in the third quarter, and it's just a really sloppy offensive play for the Wolves. And they got back and got a stop defensively. It was really impressive, to the point where there were guys up off the bench standing to applaud the effort just to get a stop, because it was like a 3-on-2 type situation. But Troy Brown was one of those guys. He got back quick. I think Shake Milton was on the floor at that point as well. They got back, stopped the ball, and got a stop. And last year, that's a bucket for the other team. 10 times out of 10. I'm not exaggerating. Like, the transition defense was so bad last season that it dragged down what was a really impressive half-court defense for the Wolves. And the Wolves ended up only 10th in defensive rating when they were like one of the very best teams in terms of half-court defense. Troy Brown is going to have a big impact on that transition defense this year for the Wolves. I believe that. Yeah, he might be the 9th or 10th guy in the rotation, but he was really impressive in terms of, or I think he will be very impressive in terms of transition defense this season. Duds, I don't have any true duds in this game. It was just kind of all over the place in terms of, guys on the floor and opportunities that players were getting. I would say in terms of guys who didn't do the most with their minutes, Leonard Miller played the whole fourth quarter, didn't make a basket. He was 0-4 shooting, forced a couple of shots. He had 3 boards and a block, though. So, not a dud. It was a decent performance. I mentioned already Daisha Nix, I think, would have liked to have played a little better. Same with Trevor Keels. Matt Ryan he hit a couple of deep threes in his 4 minutes. I don't know what his future looks like in a Wolves uniform. He was the last guy besides DJ Carton off the bench for the Wolves. I don't want to say that those 2 threes saved his roster spot, because that would be ridiculous if that's really what we're doing here. I would be a little surprised if he was still on a 2-way deal next week. I just think you could do more with those spots. I've talked about that before. I still feel that way. Nobody overall, though, was a dud in this game. I thought in general the Wolves played well. They competed. They ended up being a +8 on the glass against the team that you'd think they'd struggle against on the glass. They were sloppy with the ball at times offensively, but this was just a well-rounded, all-around performance. Great Ant first half, a good Anton Rudy performance in the first half, very strong bench unit performance, both the second unit and the third, the deep bench. In general, an impressive win for the Wolves, and they're 5-0 in the preseason. Next week, it is prediction season. The Wolves open Wednesday night. That means Monday and Tuesday are just prediction shows. We'll go through the most recent Ringer player rankings. We'll talk about Hollinger's Western Conference rankings. We'll talk about some other predictions that are out there floating around. I also want to talk Zach Lowe's. This is just more fun. League pass rankings. The Wolves ranked highly there on ESPN. We'll do all that next week. I'll give my Timberwolves win total prediction for this season. I'll remind you where that landed last year, what my prediction was and where they finished. And then also Western Conference standings predictions this year. I'll also talk about, I think I still have what I predicted last year, which was okay, by the way. I did an okay job with that. So we'll talk about that for this year as well. That's next week. Wednesday, we'll finish that up, and we'll also preview the matchup Wednesday between Wolves Raptors Wednesday night from Toronto. That game is in Toronto Wednesday evening. So all that's upcoming next week. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch the show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app, which you can download on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Beecken and at Locked On T-Wolves. Such an exciting time of year, and we're very excited to have you along for the ride as we embark on yet another year of Timberwolves basketball. Of course, this show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.